surprising facts about China, and I'm gonna share them with you in this video. It has been estimated that there is a new skyscraper built in China every 5 days, which basically means that there are 73 new skyscrapers built in China every single year. More people speak Mandarin Chinese as their first language than any other language on the planet, but Mandarin is not the only language used in China. There are approximately 300 living languages in China, plus plenty of dialects. Basically, all Chinese provinces and a lot of cities have their own dialects. For example, in Shanghai, where I used to live, there's a dialect or language called Shanghainese. I think actually Shanghainese qualifies for being called a language and not a dialect because it's so different from Mandarin. And actually, if you just speak Mandarin and you don't know any Shanghainese, it can be very difficult to have a conversation together. In China, it's a very common thing to do to fight for a bill at the end of a meal, especially if it's a business dinner. Then it's almost like a must. You must freaking fight for that bill. By saying fight for the bill, I mean fight for the right to pay the bill for everyone. And when I say fight, I'm like not exaggerating. Like, people in China will actually fight for that bill. And it is considered a polite thing to do to show that you want to pay for everyone. A pretty popular and pretty available taste of ice cream in China is green pea. Yes. The first time I saw it, I was hanging out with a friend and she was like, "Oh, I'm feeling like some green pea ice cream today." And I was like, because I thought she was just joking, you know, she was just being a prankster. But no, she was actually feeling like some green pea ice cream. She got herself that green pea ice cream. One of the first sentences that you will learn at a Chinese class is how to say "I'm busy." Trust me, whoever studied Chinese can probably confirm that. China is home to the biggest ice sculpture festival in the world. It happens in Harbin and it looks pretty awesome. I really want to see it one day. Number 8 is considered a lucky number in China, and number 4 is considered the unlucky number because the sound of number 4 in Chinese is pretty similar to the sound of word death. And a lot of people in China will actually really care about it. A lot of hospitals don't have 4th floor. Some buildings might not even have 4th floor. And often it is actually easier to find an apartment if you are searching for an apartment to rent. It's easier to find one on 4th floor because a lot of people don't want to live on 4th floor, and I actually live on 4th floor in China. We were 4 people, so we're searching for a bigger place, and we were students, so it had to be very budget friendly. So that's why basically the only place we could find was on 4th floor. Chinese people also tend to be quite superstitious when it comes to giving gifts. So for example, a big no-go is shoes, pears, and clocks. Don't ever give those things to a Chinese person. I thought it would be super interesting to find out for this video how many Chinese characters are there out there, and my answer is basically who the F knows. So some sources say that there are approximately from 5 to 7,000 Chinese characters commonly used in the modern Chinese, but there are also some sources saying that there can be even around 80,000 to over 100,000 different Chinese characters. So basically, nobody knows. That's the answer. There's so many that nobody knows. If you would put together all Chinese railways, they could loop around the world twice. The temperatures in China can range from minus 35 Celsius degrees to plus 50 Celsius degrees. In the past, China used to be divided into 5 the time zone according to the time zone used in Beijing. So basically, in some places in China, the sun doesn't rise until like 10 a.m. In China, there is basically one app that does it all, WeChat. You can talk to people through WeChat, you can order your food, you can order a taxi, you can pay, like you literally can do it all with WeChat. If you see a building in China with a hole in it, there is a very legit excuse for that. The hole is there so the dragon can fly through and the building won't stop the dragon from flying. China has the largest population on Earth. It's home to almost 1.4 billion people, which means that approximately 20% of all world citizens are Chinese. Gathering together and dancing in public places like parks and squares is a very common thing to see in all Chinese cities pretty much. Many Chinese believe that cold water is extremely bad for you, and what you should be drinking is warm water. And even in restaurants, they will often serve you warm, boiling water. The biggest holiday in China is the Chinese New Year, and it happens in January or February. There's no set day for it, so basically every year it changes. So in the past you could only have one child in China, but now the law has been changed and now people are allowed to have 2 children. The world's biggest man-made structure is in China, and that is the Great Wall of China, and it is not true that you can see the Great Wall of China from the space. Like, at some point I actually kind of believed in that too, and I was talking to my dad and I was like, did you know that you can see the Great Wall from the space? And he was like, I don't think that's true. And I was like, wait, okay. But even though you cannot see it from space, it is still pretty big and pretty impressive. And, oh, you can slide off the Great Wall. There's this one place nearby Beijing actually, which is like a touristy part of the Great Wall, where you can climb it, and then there's this slide and you can slide down it. And not doing this is like one of the biggest regrets of my life. I literally climbed the Great Wall, I didn't slide of it, and I didn't get that t-shirt that says I climbed the Great Wall, which... China has their own zodiac system with 12 different animals, and basically every year is a different animal, and then after 12 years it goes back to the first animal, and yeah. And people often say that all animals are equally good, but still a lot of people think that dragon is obviously the coolest, and apparently the birth rate in China increases during the dragon year because so many people want to give birth during the dragon year. So a lot of older people in China, and some young, but majority of them are older people, still consider it to be okay to spit on the street and make very loud sounds when they're spitting. You should never put your chopsticks in your rice because that reminds people of the offering that you give when someone dies. The fastest train in China is the Shanghai Maglev train, and it can go up to 431 kilometers per hour. The world's longest bridge is in China, and it's the Danyang Kunshan Bridge, and it is 165 kilometers long. Tipping is not really common in China, and it is technically not a part of Chinese culture. About 40% of China's population have one of the 10 most common names in China, which is basically Wang, Zhang, I wrote it down here, Li, Zhao, Chen, Yang, Wu, Liu, Han, Huang. Okay, you get the point. There are a couple of popular surnames, and basically everyone has them. The second tallest building is in China, and it is the Shanghai Tower. It's a very cool building. China is considered a polite thing to do, to receive things with both hands. So business cards, credit cards, presents, whatever someone else is giving you, you should reach out for it with both of your hands and not just one, which I always forget, like literally always. And then I'm like, oh. It's common for foreigners who move to China to get a Chinese name. So this is my Chinese name, and basically my Chinese name is the same as my Chinese name because a Chinese name. It's the same as my normal name because I didn't know that I was supposed to have a Chinese name. So I was in the process of doing the registration at the university, and there was a huge line behind me, and the lady was like, okay, you know, so what is your Chinese name? And I was like, what do you mean my Chinese name? I don't have a Chinese name. And she was like, yeah, but you need to have one. So we basically had to come up with a Chinese name for me on the spot, and she was like, you know what, I'll just write your own name with Chinese characters, which is something a lot of people choose to do. Basically, you have 2 options. Either you write your own name or your surname with Chinese characters that sound similar, so you basically like create the sound with Chinese characters, or you just choose an actual Chinese name, which a lot of my friends did. And funny thing was that they always kept like forgetting what their Chinese name was, which is kind of funny when you forget what your name is, you know. The national animal in China is panda. Chinese people love their pandas, and actually majority of pandas in the world live in China, and those who don't actually still often belong to China. So what they do is basically they rent pandas to zoos around the world. People often think that the most difficult thing about the Chinese language are the characters, but that's not entirely true. According to myself and according to many other foreigners that have studied Chinese, the most difficult part about Chinese are actually the tones. So Chinese Mandarin has 5 different tones, but for example Cantonese has 9 different tones, which is like insane. I don't know how they do it. So tones are basically the way you pronounce letters. That's a really bad explanation. So there can be a flat tone, a falling tone, a rising tone. Yeah, and depending on the tone, the word might have a completely different meaning. If you guys know any other interesting or weird or surprising things about China, let me know in the comments.